What would you do if the people you trusted most destroyed your career on the biggest day of your life? Have you ever been betrayed so completely that it actually became the best thing that ever happened to you? I'm about to tell you exactly how that's possible. It was 9:15 a.m. on a Thursday, and I was clutching my coffee and the leather briefcase that had been my companion through 7 years of corporate warfare. I'm Hallie Bennett, and for 7 years, I'd been Porter & Company's secret weapon. The negotiator they called when million-dollar deals went sideways, when CEOs stopped returning calls, when everyone else had given up. This morning, I was supposed to close the Landstone Group merger. $45 million. 11 months of 18-hour days, 5 canceled vacations, and more red-eye flights than my body could handle. Lately, though, I'd noticed the whispers, the closed-door meetings I wasn't invited to, the subtle undermining that happens when success makes colleagues nervous. The office felt strange as I walked past the cubicles. Conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes averted. My assistant, Kelly, looked like she'd been crying. Ms. Bennett? Her voice cracked. Dean wants to see you in conference room B. Not his office. A conference room. My stomach dropped, but I forced a smile. Thanks, Kelly. Hold my calls until after the Landstone signing. As I walked toward conference room B, every instinct screamed danger. Nina Collins was already there, sitting in my usual seat, looking far too comfortable for a consultant who was supposed to be observing and learning. What would you have done at that moment? Walked in, or turned around and ran? Conference room B felt like a tribunal. The blinds were drawn, casting shadows across the polished mahogany table. Dean Barrett sat at the head, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something that looked suspiciously like guilt. Harold Blake stood by the window, his back to me, shoulders rigid as stone. And there was Nina Collins, the management consultant who'd been shadowing me for 3 months, supposedly learning our processes. She wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sit down, Hallie, Harold Blake said without turning around. I need to be at Landstone in 20 minutes for the final signing, I replied, remaining standing. Whatever this is, it can wait. Actually, it can't. Harold Blake finally faced me, his gray eyes avoiding mine like a guilty teenager. We've made some decisions about the direction of the Landstone deal. The word decisions hit me like ice water. Nina leaned forward, her voice honey-sweet with poison underneath. The board feels that a fresh perspective might be beneficial for today's closing. Fresh perspective. Corporate speak for, you're out. You're replacing me? The words came out steadier than I felt. Today? On the day I'm supposed to close? Harold Blake smoothed his tie, a nervous tell I'd noticed during our most stressful negotiations. The board feels you've become too personally involved with the McAllister relationship. Potential conflicts of interest. Nina will provide the objective distance we need. But the real blow came next. Your role has become redundant. Redundant? I laughed, but the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. I built this deal from nothing. Evan McAllister won't even take your calls, Harold Blake. People adapt, Nina said with the confidence of someone who'd never had a real client hang up on her. I'm sure Mr. McAllister will appreciate a more collaborative approach. She had no idea. Evan McAllister hated corporate buzzwords almost as much as he hated being managed by committee. Our relationship was built on straight talk, mutual respect, and late-night problem-solving sessions that no MBA program could replicate. The decision is final, Dean said, and I could hear the regret in his voice. Security will escort you out. Your severance package is quite generous. Severance. Like money could buy back 7 years of my life. I stood slowly, gathering what remained of my dignity. You know what, Harold Blake? You'll regret this. Is that a threat? Harold Blake's eyebrows shot up. No, I said, picking up my briefcase. It's a promise. As I reached the door, Nina called out, "Oh, Hallie. I'll need all the Landstone files transferred to my desk within the hour." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, and smiled for the first time that morning. Of course. I'll make sure you get everything you deserve. The emphasis on deserve wasn't lost on anyone in the room, but they had no idea what I really meant. The security escort through the office was designed to humiliate, standard Porter and Company protocol that applied whether you were a janitor or their top dealmaker. My colleagues couldn't meet my eyes as I was paraded past their desks, 7 years of relationship building reduced to a cardboard box of personal belongings. But they'd made one catastrophic mistake. In my briefcase, tucked between my legal pad and laptop, was something that would make their lives very interesting: the handwritten notes from my last call with Evan McAllister. 3 nights ago, he'd insisted on a final liability amendment, a last-minute change that transformed the deal from merely good to absolutely bulletproof. I'd planned to have it formally drafted this morning, before the signing. Evan had specifically requested it stay off the official record until signing day due to competitive intelligence concerns, the kind of personal touch that separated me from corporate robots like Nina Collins. As the elevator descended, I checked my phone. No missed calls yet, but that would change soon. Nina Collins thought she could waltz into my relationship with Evan McAllister and pick up where I left off. She had the contracts, the presentations, the full backing of Porter and Company. What she didn't have was the one piece that made the entire deal work. And in about 30 minutes, she was going to find that out the hard way. I sat in my car in the Porter and Company parking garage, engine running, watching the digital clock tick toward 10 a.m. The Landstone meeting would be starting any moment. Nina would be walking into that boardroom with her practiced smile and her incomplete understanding of what Evan actually needed. My phone buzzed at exactly 10:23 a.m. Hallie Bennett. What the hell is going on over there? Evan McAllister's voice cut through the line like a blade. Some woman named Nina just walked into my conference room claiming to be my new point of contact. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment I'd been anticipating. I'm no longer with Porter and Company, Evan. Since when? Since about an hour ago. They fired you? Today? On the day we're supposed to close? His voice climbed with each word. Do they have any idea what you've put into this deal? Apparently not. And the liability amendment we discussed? The one you said you'd handle this morning? There it was. The million-dollar question. Did you mention that to Nina? She looked at me like I was speaking Mandarin. Started talking about honoring existing contractual frameworks or some other MBA bullshit. The disgust in his voice was palpable. This is exactly what you promised me we'd avoid. My heart pounded as I realized the opportunity unfolding before me. Evan, what do you want to do? I want to talk to you. Face to face. Right now. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone and realizing that everything was about to change. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in Evan McAllister's corner office, a space that screamed success and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the financial district, and I could actually see the Porter and Company building from here. A glass tower that suddenly felt very far away. They used you, Evan said, pouring 2 glasses of bourbon despite it being barely past 10:30 a.m. Squeezed every ounce of value out of your relationship with me, then tossed you aside for someone cheaper. That about sums it up. And now they expect me to shake hands with a stranger and sign away $45 million like nothing happened? I sipped the bourbon, feeling its warmth spread through my chest. What are you thinking? He moved to the window, his reflection overlapping with the city skyline. I'm thinking Porter and Company just showed me exactly who they are. And I don't do business with people I can't trust. You're walking away from the merger? I'm walking away from them. He turned back to me, and I saw something dangerous flickering in his expression. But not necessarily from you. The implication hung between us like a live wire. We'd talked about this before. Late-night conversations over client dinners that ran too long, hypothetical discussions about building something different, something better. Remember that conversation we had in Chicago? About starting our own firm? My pulse quickened. That was hypothetical. Was it? His smile was sharp as a knife. I've been looking for the right partner for months, Hallie. Someone with your skills, your integrity. I was just waiting for the right moment. You're talking about starting a private equity firm, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That requires capital, infrastructure, time to build relationships. I have capital. You have the relationships. And Porter & Company just handed us the perfect motivation. Evan pulled a thick folder from his desk drawer. I've been thinking about this for months, Hallie. Your situation just accelerated the timeline. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Incorporation papers, already drafted. Banking agreements with numbers that made my salary look like pocket change. Office lease agreements for prime real estate in the financial district. You've been planning this. I believe in contingency planning. I've had legal teams on standby for months, waiting for the right market disruption opportunity. I didn't build a $200 million company by waiting for perfect conditions. He leaned forward, his intensity almost physical. The question is, are you in? My phone buzzed. A text from Dean Barrett, emergency. Call me now. I showed Evan the screen. He laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Let me guess. Nina's discovering that confidence doesn't close deals. Probably. Perfect timing, then. Because I have a proposition that'll make Porter & Company very unhappy. His smile turned predatory. What do you know about Cromwell Industries? The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Cromwell was Landstone's biggest competitor, a company we'd analyzed extensively during our due diligence. They're privately held. Around $90 million in annual revenue. Why? Because they're for sale. And if we move fast, we could own them by next week. You want to acquire Landstone's biggest competitor, I said slowly, the implications crystallizing in my mind. While they're stuck in limbo with Porter & Company. Not just acquire. Transform. Cromwell has been underperforming for years, but they have incredible bones, manufacturing capacity, distribution networks, customer relationships that go back decades. Evan pulled up financial projections on his laptop. With the right capital injection and management team, we could double their revenue in 18 months. My phone rang. Dean Barrett's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, Evan said. Put it on speaker. I hesitated for half a second, then swiped to accept. Hallie, thank God. We have a situation here. Hello, Dean. How's the Landstone meeting going? That's what I'm calling about. McAllister is asking about some amendment that Nina knows nothing about. The files you sent over don't include any mention of liability modifications. That's because the amendment wasn't in the files. A long pause. I could practically hear his blood pressure spiking. Where is it? I looked at Evan, who was grinning like a shark who'd spotted blood in the water. With me. In my personal notes. Hallie, you need to come back. We can work this out. Better position, better compensation, equity participation. That's very generous, Dean. But I'm afraid I'll have to decline. You can't be serious. This is your entire career we're talking about. You're absolutely right, I said, standing and walking to Evan's window. It is my career. Which is exactly why I'm taking control of it. I hung up and turned to Evan. When do we start? The next 4 hours passed in a blur of legal documents, phone calls, and strategic planning that would have made military generals envious. Thanks to Evan's standing in the financial community, paperwork that normally took weeks was processed overnight. By 2 p.m., Bennett McAllister Partners existed as a legal entity. By 3:00 p.m., we had banking relationships that would make established firms weep with envy. Are you feeling the adrenaline rush yet? Because if this story is hitting you the way it hit me in that moment, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Trust me, what's coming next will blow your mind. Evan's network was staggering: pension funds, sovereign wealth managers, family offices with assets that dwarfed most countries' GDP. The kind of investors who valued relationships over PowerPoint decks and track records over promises. The Cromwell opportunity is perfect timing, Evan explained as we sat in our hastily furnished conference room, surrounded by boxes and the smell of fresh coffee. They've been struggling with cash flow for 6 months. The founding family wants out, but they need the right buyer. Someone who understands their industry. Someone who can preserve their legacy while modernizing their operations. He pulled up Cromwell's organizational chart. Their current CEO is retiring in 3 months. Their board is looking for new leadership. I studied the financials on my laptop screen. Cromwell was a textbook case of a fundamentally sound company with temporary problems. Exactly the kind of situation that created opportunities for people like us. This could work, I said, excitement building despite myself. If we structure it correctly, position it as a growth story rather than a turnaround. My thoughts exactly. My phone buzzed with another call from Porter and Company. I declined it without looking. They're getting desperate, Evan observed. Good. Let them sweat. But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to cross a line from which there would be no return. At 4:47 p.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Hallie Bennett. MS. Bennett, this is Joseph Lancaster from Porter and Company's legal department. The voice was crisp, professional, and completely humorless. We need to discuss the intellectual property implications of your departure. I felt ice water replace the blood in my veins. Intellectual property meant they were threatening to sue me. What intellectual property, Mr. Lancaster? Any materials, documents, or work product related to the Landstone transaction, including modifications or amendments developed during your employment with Porter and Company. Evan was watching my expression carefully. I put the call on speaker. I haven't shared any confidential information, I said carefully. The amendment I referenced was based on my own professional analysis of client requirements. Nevertheless, any work product created during your employment belongs to Porter and Company. Will require immediate production of all such materials. And if I refuse? Then we'll be compelled to seek injunctive relief, including potential restraints on your future employment in the industry. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. They were trying to destroy my career before it could begin. Mr. Lancaster, I'll need to consult with my attorney before responding to any such demands. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to comply. The line went dead, leaving Evan and me staring at each other across the conference table. Classic corporate intimidation, Evan said finally. They can't win on merit, so they're trying to win through fear. Can they actually do this? Let's find out. He was already dialing his phone. Patricia. It's Evan McAllister. Clear your schedule. I need you here in an hour. Patricia Blackwood arrived at our office like a force of nature wrapped in an Armani suit. As one of the city's premier employment attorneys, she commanded fees that made investment bankers flinch, but her track record in corporate warfare was flawless. Standard intimidation tactics, she said after reviewing my employment agreement and the legal threat. Designed to scare departing employees into compliance. But can they stop me from working with Evan? Not unless you're sharing specific proprietary information or violating clearly defined restrictive covenants. She flipped through my contract with practiced efficiency. Your agreement has broad language, but it's poorly drafted. They're trying to claim ownership of your professional judgment. What's our response? We document everything, comply with legitimate confidentiality obligations, and call their bluff. Patricia closed the file with a snap. They're fishing. If they had a real case, they wouldn't be making demands through phone calls. Relief flooded through me, but Patricia wasn't finished. However, they can pursue aggressive litigation tactics for several months if they choose to. Expensive and time-consuming, even when you ultimately win. What do you recommend? Let them fire the first shot. Don't give them ammunition. She stood, gathering her files. And whatever you do, don't contact any Porter and Company clients or employees. Stay completely clean. As she left, my phone buzzed with a text from Nina Collins. We should talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I showed the message to Evan. Interesting, he said. Sounds like desperation. Or a trap. Only one way to find out. Nina suggested meeting at the Summit Club, an upscale restaurant where deals were made over expensive wine and carefully worded conversations. I almost declined, then curiosity won out. What could she possibly want? The restaurant was dimly lit and discreet, the kind of place where privacy was as important as the menu. Nina was already waiting at a corner table, her corporate armor slightly tarnished after what I assumed had been a very difficult afternoon. You came, she said as I joined her. I had 10 minutes. She ordered wine. I stuck with water. Hallie, I think we got off on the wrong foot this morning. You mean when you stole my job? I didn't steal anything. I was offered an opportunity to contribute to an important transaction. Her smile was perfectly practiced. There's no reason this has to be adversarial. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty adversarial. Nina leaned forward, her expression shifting to something that might have been sincerity. The Landstone meeting was challenging. Mr. McAllister seems to have very specific expectations about the transaction structure. He's a detail-oriented CEO. That's why the deal works. About this amendment he mentioned. She paused delicately. I was hoping you might help me understand what he's expecting. And there it was. The real reason for this meeting. You want me to save your deal. I want us to find a mutually beneficial solution. I stood up, leaving $20 on the table. Here's my solution, Nina, good luck. As I walked away, she called out, this doesn't have to end badly for everyone, Hallie. But she was wrong. For some people, it already had. I was in my car when Evan called with news that changed everything. I just got off the phone with Thomas Cromwell. His board wants to meet with us tomorrow morning. That's incredibly fast. It gets better. I also have a contact at Landstone who says their board called an emergency session before close of business to discuss the Porter and Company situation. I pulled over, my heart hammering against my ribs. What kind of discussion? The kind where they're questioning whether to proceed with the merger at all. Apparently, McAllister's been very vocal about his concerns regarding Porter's reliability and competence. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Landstone walked away from Porter and Company, it would be devastating. Stock prices would crater, jobs would be lost, reputations destroyed. Evan, I never intended for this to happen. Hey, you didn't cause this. Porter and Company. Leadership did when they threw away their most valuable asset for a consultant with no real experience. But innocent people are going to get hurt. Good people who had nothing to do with what happened to me. That's not your responsibility, Hallie. Your responsibility is to yourself and your future. He was right, logically. But logic didn't make it easier to live with. What time is the Cromwell meeting? 9 a.m. sharp. And Hallie? Come hungry. We're about to feast. As I hung up, I realized I was standing at a crossroads that would define not just my career, but the kind of person I was going to become. Tomorrow would determine whether I was seeking justice or revenge. The distinction, I was learning, was thinner than I'd ever imagined. I arrived at Cromwell Industries at 8:45 a.m., dressed in my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of analysis that Evan and I had worked on until 2 a.m. The building was impressive. 50 floors of glass and steel that spoke of legacy and ambition in equal measure. Evan met me in the marble lobby, looking energized despite our late night. Ready to make history? As ready as I'll ever be. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending to Mount Olympus. When the doors opened, we were greeted by Thomas Cromwell himself, third-generation leader of the family business, a man whose handshake had sealed billion-dollar deals. Mr. McAllister, Ms. Bennett. Welcome. The boardroom was a monument to corporate power, with windows overlooking the entire financial district. I could see Porter and Company's building in the distance, and wondered what chaos was unfolding in their conference rooms right now. I understand you have a proposition for us, Thomas said, settling into his chair with the gravity of old money. Evan opened his presentation folder. We believe Cromwell Industries is significantly undervalued by current market conditions. With appropriate capital investment and strategic modernization, this company could triple its market position within 24 months. As he spoke, I watched Thomas's face carefully, interest, skepticism, hope cycling through in subtle expressions. The manufacturing sector is evolving rapidly, I added. Companies that adapt to new realities will thrive. Those that don't. I let the implication hang in the air like smoke. What level of investment are we discussing? Evan smiled like a predator who'd spotted prey. $150 million. The Cromwell meeting lasted 4 hours, and by the time we walked out, we had a handshake agreement for exclusive due diligence to begin immediately. Thomas Cromwell's parting words echoed in my mind. Ms. Bennett, you've given us hope when we thought we were out of options. We were celebrating with coffee in the lobby when my phone rang. Harold Blake's name on the screen. Take it, Evan urged. This should be interesting. Hallie. Harold Blake's voice was strained to the breaking point. We need to talk immediately. I'm listening. Landstone pulled out. They've terminated the merger agreement completely. Even though I'd expected it, hearing the words felt like a punch to the stomach. I'm sorry to hear that, Harold Blake. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you orchestrated this entire disaster. I didn't orchestrate anything. I simply refused to help clean up a mess that shouldn't have existed. This is going to destroy us, Hallie. Stock price, investor confidence, employee morale, everything we've built. I closed my eyes, seeing the faces of 200 Porter and Company employees whose lives would be upended by decisions made in executive conference rooms. You should have considered that before you decided I was redundant. This isn't over, Hallie. If I discover you've violated any confidentiality agreements or used proprietary information, you'll what? Sue me? Good luck proving I did anything but refuse to help you fix your own mistakes. We trusted you. And I trusted you. Look how that worked out for both of us. I hung up and looked at Evan, who was watching me with something that might have been concern. Any regrets? About leaving Porter and Company? No. About the collateral damage? Yes. That's what separates us from them, he said quietly. We still have consciences. That afternoon, Porter and Company's stock price dropped 22% when news of the failed Landstone merger hit the financial networks. CNBC was calling it the deal that got away, and analysts were openly questioning the company's leadership and decision-making processes. I watched the coverage from our new office, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and guilt. Nina Collins appeared on one segment, looking shell-shocked as she tried to explain the strategic differences that led to the merger's collapse. "Any second thoughts?" Evan asked, joining me at the window. "About our choices?" "No." "About the people who are going to pay for Harold Blake's ego?" "Absolutely." "You know what the fundamental difference is between you and them?" "Tell me." "You took control of your own destiny. They're still waiting for someone else to make their decisions." My phone buzzed with a text from Dean Barrett. "Coffee tomorrow?" "I owe you more than an apology." I showed Evan the message. "Are you going to meet him?" "I don't know. Part of me wants closure." "And the other part?" "The other part wants to focus on building something that matters." Evan gestured toward the documents scattered across our conference table, the Cromwell acquisition papers that would officially launch Bennett McAllister Partners into the big leagues. "What matters is what we do next." At 6 p.m., Thomas Cromwell called to confirm the deal structure. By 7 p.m., we were opening champagne in our half-furnished office, toasting a future we'd built from the ashes of betrayal. But success, I was learning, came with its own price. Hashtag 6 months later, I found myself back at the Summit Club, but this time for a very different reason. Bennett McAllister Partners had been profiled in Forbes as the deal-making duo reshaping private equity, and the Cromwell turnaround was being studied in business schools as a masterclass in strategic acquisition. We'd transformed Cromwell Industries into a lean, modern manufacturing powerhouse. Revenue had doubled. Employment had expanded. The founding family had retained a stake in a company worth 3 times what they'd originally hoped to sell it for. Porter and Company, meanwhile, had never recovered from the Landstone disaster. Harold Blake had been forced out by the board. Dean Barrett had taken early retirement. Nina Collins had disappeared into the consulting wilderness. As I sat at my table, reviewing acquisition proposals worth more than $1 billion, Dean approached hesitantly. "Hallie? Thank you for agreeing to see me." He looked older, grayer, diminished by the events of the past 6 months. "Hello, Dean. You said you had something to tell me." "Porter and Company is being acquired. The new owners have been watching your success for months. They specifically want you back as managing partner. Full equity stake, complete autonomy." I sipped my wine, considering the irony. 6 months ago, I would have killed for that offer. "That's very generous. But I'm not interested." "Can I ask why?" "Because I'm not the same person who got fired from that conference room. I don't need Porter and Company anymore." Through the window, I could see our building, the Bennett McAllister Partners logo gleaming in brushed steel letters. "You built something incredible," Dean said quietly. "I should have fought for you." "Yes, you should have. But you didn't, and that taught me the most valuable lesson of my career." "Which is?" I stood, leaving money on the table for both our drinks. "That the only person you can truly count on is yourself. Everything else is just luck." As I walked toward the exit, my phone buzzed with a text from Evan. "The Peterson Group wants to meet next week. Are you ready to change the world again?" I smiled, typing back, "Always ready. Let's build an empire." The elevator doors closed, and I caught my reflection in the polished steel, confident, successful, and completely in control of my own destiny. Sometimes revenge isn't about getting even. Sometimes it's about getting so far ahead that your enemies become irrelevant. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's about discovering that the best revenge is simply becoming the person you were always meant to be. So here's my question for you. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back, or would you have walked away? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story inspired you to take control of your own destiny, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories about turning setbacks into comebacks, because trust me, this is just the beginning. Sometimes the best chapters of your life start with someone else trying to write your ending.